Boxing is dead. Now, this is a phrase that I hear quite often whenever a robbery has occurred in the boxing scene. But is it actually true? To straight up answer your question,
No! No! No!
it still does great numbers and generates a lot of hype whenever a big fight takes place. So why do we still hear people to this day say a certain phrase that boxing is dead? Now, I've got a couple of answers to this question. My first answer to this is when a robbery happens in boxing, like when it happened between Jack Catterall and Josh Taylor. You had a lot of people saying that boxing is finished and that it's dead, when realistically that just isn't the case. People are just very, very frustrated that the right person didn't get the nod when it came to the decision, and they understand it, but I feel like there's way too many people saying that boxing is dead when it's just not the case at all. And then secondly, I feel like it's more MMA fans, if I'm being completely honest. There's like a fight between boxing and MMA fans, like which sport is better. We can't just enjoy both for whatever reason. Don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people who are both fans of MMA and boxing, like myself, but there is a few people out there who will only like MMA and will slander boxing whenever they can, and likewise of boxing will only love boxing and slander MMA whenever they get the opportunity. And I often see a lot of MMA fans say that boxing is dead whenever a big fight's happening, or, you know, maybe a fight's flopped what shouldn't have flopped. You see it quite often. Not only that, but MMA is still a very young sport, and it's safe to say that it's on the up right now, whereas boxing is just kind of in the same limbo as it usually is, just, you know, it's kind of a plateau, and that's because this sport's been around for God knows how long. It's kind of like football. I don't think football will ever be considered on the up again, because it's like boxing, where it's just remaining the same, because almost everyone watches it and enjoys it, whereas MMA still feels like it has to prove itself to an extent. You know, there's a lot of, I know a lot of older people are like, oh, well, it's very brutal, when, you know, it's just like boxing, you get CTE as well, and they're okay with that. But I feel like MMA is getting a lot more eyes recently, and I don't know, I feel like people see it as, oh, well, boxing's going downhill, whereas MMA is going uphill, and that's what they kind of play off, and I just don't think that's the case at all. Like, I've seen a lot of MMA fans like, oh, well, you don't see boxing fans watching every single boxing event every week. And that's just not true. I watch MMA almost every single week when it's on. Like, even if it's a shitty fight night card, I might watch a couple of fights. Same goes for the boxing. You'll have a lot of boxing fans who do that. It's just, you aren't doing that because you're not a hardcore boxing fan, or you're not a massive fan of a sport. You know what I mean? That's how it plays out. So you might have this perception of, you know, oh, well, people aren't watching every boxing event, when really that is the case. And when it comes to the big fights, I think both MMA and boxing have proved that they're able to get a lot of eyes on the sport and generate big numbers. And to be honest, when people talk about boxing being dead, I feel like it usually ends up in the conversation of being boxing versus MMA. Why can't we just enjoy both boxing and MMA? That's what I've been doing, and I've lived quite a happy life so far, so why can't everyone else do the same? I don't really understand it. I don't know why people go like, it's someone else's neck for enjoying another sport, another combat sport. There's nothing wrong with it. If you want to be a fan of MMA, that's completely fine. And if you want to be a fan of boxing, that's completely fine. That doesn't mean that one of the sports is dead, or, you know, it's ended up going downhill, because that's definitely just not the case. And then to get back to my answer about people calling the sport of boxing dead simply because a robbery has taken place, first of all, let me tell you that if it's a very, 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 very close fight, it can't be considered a robbery. I see it happen so often that people consider a fight a robbery when it's just simply not the case. But let's say it is genuinely a robbery if it takes place. I don't think that means that boxing is dying because of that, because, you know, fights have always been rigged in the past, or, you know, they always get given to a certain fighter who's maybe a part of like Matchroom, or, you know, if it's their home show, whatever, if it's in their hometown, stuff like that. That's always been the case, even in MMA. So although it may be very, very, very frustrating when the wrong person gets given the decision in a win they probably shouldn't deserve, I don't think it's fair to say that the sport of boxing is dying because of that. And right now, I feel like boxing is literally metro booming, because last year you had Terence Crawford take on Errol Spence in a big fight that everyone had been wanting to see for many years. You had Naoya Inoue taking on Stephen Fulton, and yes, that wasn't two big names, but it it was certainly a big fight when it comes to boxing. We also had Gervonta Davis taking on Ryan Garcia, the opposite of Naoya Inoue versus Stephen Fulton, where that was two massive names and a very important fight of boxing. And you know, there's many big fights this year, like Tyson Fury with Usyk. I know it got rescheduled, but regardless, you then got you just had Ryan Garcia against Devin Haney, and you're also going to get Artur Beterbiev versus Bivol. That'll be another big fight. You got 5v5 with Matchroom and Frank Warren's stable. I just think boxing is doing really well right now, and I don't think it's fair to say that boxing is dying, because that's definitely not the case. But what do you guys think? Do you think that boxing is dying, or do you think the exact same as me and think that it's thriving at the moment and not dying at all? Let me know in the comments, leave a like, and maybe consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.